I stood in our bedroom doorway, 7 months pregnant, staring at my things piled in the hallway. Emily needs the bedroom tonight for her important presentation tomorrow, my husband Mark explained casually. When I refused to sleep on the hardwood floor, he grabbed divorce papers from his desk. Then maybe we should end this. His smirk vanished when I calmly took the papers, added my signature and handed them back. I've been waiting for you to say that for months. What he didn't know. I'd already emptied our joint accounts that morning. The look of complete shock on Mark's face was almost worth the 7 months of hell I'd endured. Almost. What do you mean? He sputtered, looking down at my signature, his confident demeanor crumbling. Olivia, you can't be serious. Emily appeared in the doorway behind him, her perfectly styled blonde hair falling over one shoulder of her designer blouse. My designer blouse, to be precise. The one Mark had given me for our anniversary last year. Is everything okay? She asked, voice dripping with fake concern while her eyes gleamed with triumph. I placed my hand protectively over my swollen belly, feeling my daughter kick as if she was urging me forward. Everything is perfect, actually. Mark just helped me make a decision I've been contemplating for some time. Mark's face flushed an alarming shade of red. This is ridiculous. You're hormonal. You don't know what you're saying. Actually, I replied, reaching into my purse and pulling out an identical set of papers. I've had these drawn up for weeks. I just wasn't sure when the right moment would present itself. I gestured to my clothes piled in the hallway. Thank you for making it abundantly clear. 4 hours earlier, I'd sat across from Caroline, my college roommate turned divorce attorney, in her sleek downtown office. The city skyline visible through the windows reflected the empire Mark and I had built together. The empire he'd gradually been trying to edge me out of since the day I told him I was pregnant. Are you absolutely certain? Caroline had asked, sliding the papers across her mahogany desk. Once you start this process. I've never been more certain of anything, I'd interrupted, thinking about the text message I'd received from our housekeeper that morning. Mr. Wilson asked me to move your things from the master bedroom. Is this okay? Nothing was okay. It hadn't been for months. The accounts. I'd asked Caroline. Transferred this morning as we discussed. Perfectly legal given your position in the company and your name on the accounts. He can't touch it without going through court now. Back in our Mark's bedroom doorway, Emily's smug smile was beginning to falter. She tugged nervously at the collar of my blouse. Mark? She questioned, her voice higher than usual. This clearly wasn't following the script she'd imagined. Mark ran his hands through his hair. A gesture I once found endearing but now recognized as his tell when he was calculating his next move. You're making a massive mistake, he growled, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. Do you have any idea what this will do to the company? To our clients? Your reputation? I laughed then, a genuine laugh that felt foreign after months of carefully measured responses designed not to trigger his criticism. My reputation? You mean as the woman who co-founded Wilson Enterprises and brought in our 3 biggest clients? Or as the woman who's been systematically sidelined by her husband who's sleeping with his assistant? Emily gasped, her hand flying to her throat. That's a horrible accusation. Mark and I are purely professional. Save it, I said, not even sparing her a glance. The Montrose Hotel has excellent security cameras in their elevator lobbies. Very high definition. Mark's face drained of color. The Montrose was where we held our executive retreats, where I'd spotted them entering the same room on the security feed I still had access to through our company's systems. You've been spying on me? Mark demanded, his voice rising. I've been protecting myself and our daughter, I corrected, emphasizing the word "our" with bitter irony. Something I should have started doing the moment you suggested I take a health pause from the company I helped build. Mark's mother appeared behind Emily, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. My suitcases, the signed divorce papers, the tension crackling in the air. What on earth is happening here? Eleanor Wilson demanded, her gaze shifting from Mark's ashen face to my defiant stance. Ask your son, I replied, stepping back to let her see my things piled unceremoniously in the hallway. Ask him why his pregnant wife is being displaced from her bedroom. Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she noticed Emily wearing my blouse, understanding dawning in her expression. Mark Anthony Wilson, she said in the same tone she probably used when he was 10, please tell me you haven't been this stupid. Mark opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No clever business negotiation tactics would help him now. I picked up the small suitcase I'd already packed that morning, just in case today was the day. I'll be at the Four Seasons until I find something more permanent, I informed them all, my voice steadier than I felt. My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow regarding company operations. I suggest you don't make any major decisions without consulting her first. As I turned to leave, Eleanor stepped forward and grasped my hand. Olivia, she said softly, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. You don't have to go to a hotel. Behind her, Mark seemed to relax slightly as if his mother might save the day. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Our guest house is empty. And unlike my son, I remember who actually closed the Westerfield account that paid for it. The look on Mark's face when his mother took my side was priceless. His jaw clenched, a muscle twitching in his cheek. The same reaction he'd have when a business deal wasn't going his way. Mother, you don't understand the situation, he started, voice dropping into the smooth, persuasive tone he used to charm investors. Eleanor Wilson raised one perfectly manicured hand to silence him. I understand enough. We'll discuss this later. She turned to me, ignoring Emily who was shifting uncomfortably behind Mark. Come Olivia. I'll help you get settled. As I followed Eleanor out, I caught a glimpse of Mark pulling Emily into the bedroom, my bedroom, and closing the door. The click of the lock echoed through the hallway, oddly final. 5 years earlier that sound would have shattered me. Now it just confirmed what I already knew. My marriage had been over long before tonight. I should have seen this coming, Eleanor sighed as we walked through the manicured garden toward the guest house. Mark has always had his father's worst traits. I just hoped. I placed my hand on her arm. You don't need to explain, Eleanor. How long? She asked quietly. How long has this been going on? The guest house came into view, a charming 2-bedroom cottage at the edge of the property that Mark and I had designed together during happier times. Back when together actually meant something. The affair? I'm not sure. Maybe since Emily started a year ago. I paused at the entrance. But things changed the moment I told him I was pregnant. 8 months ago I had planned the announcement so carefully. A private dinner at Maison where we'd had our first date. A custom-made card with the ultrasound tucked inside. I'd even worn the blue dress he always said brought out my eyes. We're having a baby, I'd said, sliding the card across the table, my heart racing with excitement. Mark had stared at the grainy image, his expression unreadable. Then instead of the joy I'd expected, he'd asked, how will this affect the Kingston acquisition? The Kingston acquisition. Not our family. Not our future. Business deal. Did you hear me? I'd asked, tears threatening. We're going to have a child. He'd reached across the table then, squeezing my hand. Of course, that's wonderful news. I'm just concerned about timing. You know how crucial this period is for the company. That night he'd slept on his side of the bed, a chasm of Egyptian cotton between us. The next morning he'd announced at our executive meeting that I would be scaling back my responsibilities due to my condition. My condition. As if pregnancy was a terminal illness rather than the creation of life. I never told you this, Eleanor said now, unlocking the guest house door. But I almost left Richard when Mark was 2. He was doing exactly what Mark is doing to you. Pushing me out, diminishing my contributions. The cottage was immaculate, with fresh flowers on the coffee table. I wondered if Eleanor had somehow anticipated this moment. What stopped you? I asked, lowering myself carefully onto the sofa, my back aching from the stress of the evening. Eleanor smiled sadly. Fear. Financial dependency. The belief I could fix him. She sat beside me. 3 mistakes I won't let you make. 3 weeks after my pregnancy announcement, Mark had brought Emily to her first executive meeting. 26, with an MBA from Wharton and legs that seemed to extend beyond what physics should allow. Emily will be taking over some of Olivia's accounts, Mark had announced, not bothering to look at me. to ensure everything runs smoothly while Olivia focuses on her health. My health. As if growing our child was an inconvenient illness. I'd objected privately afterward in his office with the door closed. Those are my client relationships. I've nurtured them for years. And you'll get them back after the baby, he'd said dismissively, scrolling through emails on his phone. This is temporary. Emily is just helping out. But temporary became permanent. One by one, my clients were redirected to Emily. My office was relocated to a smaller space, closer to the restrooms for your convenience. My calls were intercepted, my ideas attributed to others in meetings. I was being erased. When did you know? Eleanor asked, bringing me back to the present as she prepared a cup of herbal tea in the cottage kitchen. When did you decide to leave? The moment crystallized in my memory, sharp and clear as broken glass. 2 months ago, I said. The Westridge presentation. I'd been feeling particularly well that day, the second trimester energy boost finally hitting. I'd prepared a comprehensive proposal for our biggest potential client, stayed up researching their markets, crafted a pitch that addressed their specific needs. I arrived early, presentation ready. Only to find Emily already there, standing at the head of the table, my slides open on her laptop. What are you doing? I'd asked, confusion giving way to understanding as Mark walked in. Emily will be handling this presentation, he'd said, not meeting my eyes. We need to put our best foot forward. In that moment, something inside me had hardened. Not broken, hardened. Like steel being tempered. I thought that was why I was here, I'd replied, my voice steady. Mark had finally looked at me then, his expression almost pitying. Olivia, be reasonable. You're 7 months pregnant. What if you have to run to the bathroom in the middle of the pitch? What if you get tired? What if your water breaks? We can't risk the Westridge account. Behind him, Emily had smiled sympathetically, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, I'd said, gathering my notes. How thoughtless of me to put our $30 million account at risk by existing while pregnant. I'd walked out, but I hadn't gone home. Instead, I'd driven straight to Caroline's law office. He doesn't realize, I told Eleanor now, sipping the tea she'd prepared, that while he was pushing me out of our business, he was giving me time. Time to document everything. Time to prepare. Time to remember who I was before I became Mrs. Mark Wilson. Eleanor nodded, a glint of approval in her eyes. And who are you, Olivia? I'm the woman who closed the Peterson deal when everyone said it was impossible, I answered Eleanor, straightening my shoulders. I'm the strategist who rebranded our entire product line when the market crashed. I'm the person who knows that Emily has been falsifying her quarterly reports for the past 6 months. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. Falsifying reports? Are you certain? I nodded, pulling out my phone and opening a secure folder. I've been tracking discrepancies ever since she took over my client portfolio. The numbers don't add up, especially on the Harrington account. Eleanor studied the spreadsheet I showed her, her expression darkening. Mark hasn't noticed this? Mark sees what he wants to see, I said simply. And right now, all he sees is Emily. The truth was more complicated. Part of me wondered if Mark was complicit in whatever Emily was doing. The other part suspected he was simply too infatuated to verify her work. Either way, it reflected a catastrophic lapse in judgment for a CEO. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Caroline. I should take this, I told Eleanor, who nodded and discreetly moved to the kitchen to give me privacy. He's panicking, Caroline said without preamble. He's called the office 3 times already. Apparently, he just discovered the account transfers. I glanced at my watch. That took longer than I expected. He's threatening an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Claims you're emotionally unstable due to pregnancy hormones and shouldn't have access to company funds. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Funny how my pregnancy hormones weren't an issue when I was bringing in clients, just when I'm protecting my interests. I've already contacted the board members we discussed, Caroline continued. Jenkins and Martinez are firmly on your side. Richards is on the fence but leaning toward you, especially after I mentioned the potential PR disaster of forcing out a pregnant co-founder. And my brother-in-law? I asked, referring to Mark's brother James, who held a small but significant percentage of shares. Caroline hesitated. James is complicated. He claims he needs to talk to both of you before deciding anything. Of course. James had always played both sides, careful never to directly oppose his brother while maintaining a facade of fairness. Their father had pitted them against each other from childhood, a tactic that served the family business well but destroyed any genuine brotherhood. There's something else, Caroline added, her voice dropping. Emily has been calling board members too. She's claiming insider status, saying she has concerns about the company's future under your influence. My hand instinctively moved to my belly, feeling a strong kick as if my daughter was expressing her own indignation. Let her try, I said. The board knows who built this company. After ending the call, I found Eleanor in the kitchen, pretending not to have been listening. The facade of polite distance between us had evaporated, replaced by the pragmatic alliance of two women who'd finally seen through the same man's manipulations. The annual charity gala is tomorrow night, Eleanor said casually, washing her teacup. I assume Mark will try to present a united front with Emily at his side. The Wilson Family Foundation Gala. Our company's most high-profile event of the year, with clients, partners, and industry leaders in attendance. Mark wouldn't miss the opportunity to control the narrative of our separation. He'll spin it somehow, I agreed. Probably say I'm home resting, too fragile in my condition to attend. Eleanor dried her hands, a calculating look in her eyes I'd never seen before. What if you did attend? I blinked. Show up uninvited to my own company's gala? Not uninvited, Eleanor corrected, a sly smile forming. I'm on the foundation board. I'm officially inviting you as my guest. The image of Mark's face if I appeared at the gala was almost comical. But beyond petty satisfaction, the strategic advantages were clear. Every major player in our industry would be there. The perfect opportunity to secure my position before Mark could undermine me. I don't have anything to wear, I said, the trivial objection slipping out before I could stop it. Eleanor waved dismissively. I have connections at Bergdorf's. They'll open early for us tomorrow. Besides, she added with a pointed look at my belly, I think your condition will make quite the statement, don't you? For the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Eleanor Wilson, you're not at all what I expected when I married your son. Likewise, my dear. She patted my hand. Now get some rest. Tomorrow will be eventful. After Eleanor left, I sat alone in the quiet cottage, the events of the day catching up to me. I opened my laptop to check for any company emails I should be aware of before tomorrow's inevitable confrontation. There it was, a message from Mark sent to all staff just 30 minutes ago. Due to personal matters, Olivia Wilson will be taking an indefinite leave of absence effective immediately. Please direct all inquiries previously handled by Mrs. Wilson to Emily Carson, who has been promoted to Chief Marketing Officer. So that was his play. Erase me completely, install Emily in my position, and control the narrative before I could respond. My phone buzzed with text messages from concerned colleagues. Is everything okay? Just saw Mark's email. Olivia, what's happening? Call me. Did you approve this announcement? Seems sudden. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I composed a single email to our company attorney, copying Caroline. As co-founder and majority shareholder of Wilson Enterprises, I did not authorize any change in leadership structure. Any decisions made without board approval are invalid. I will address this breach of protocol at tomorrow's emergency meeting. I hit send, then drafted another brief message to the entire executive team. I look forward to seeing everyone at the gala tomorrow evening to discuss the future of Wilson Enterprises. As I prepared for bed in the guest cottage, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. 4 months I'd seen myself through Mark's dismissive gaze. Inconvenient, diminished replacement. Now I saw something different. I saw a woman with a plan. Morning sunlight filtered through the cottage curtains, waking me from the deepest sleep I'd had in months. Ironic that my first night away from Mark would be my most peaceful. I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Mark, 3 from Emily, and dozens of messages from colleagues. All ignored. Instead, I opened the email from Caroline, sent at 5:43 a.m. Emergency board meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. Mark pushed for earlier, but Jenkins insisted on giving all members proper notice. Documents attached confirm your executive status and shareholding position. Or something intimidating. I smiled at the last line. Caroline understood that perception was everything in corporate battles. A knock at the door revealed Eleanor, immaculately dressed despite the early hour, holding a garment bag and a tray of breakfast. Decaf latte, avocado toast, and prenatal smoothie, she announced, setting down the tray. And your armor for today's battles. She unzipped the garment bag to reveal a stunning maternity dress in deep burgundy, powerful, professional, and impossible to ignore. You work quickly, I observed, running my hand over the luxurious fabric. I've had years of practice managing crises in this family, Eleanor replied dryly. Now eat. We have preparations to make. Over breakfast we strategized. The emergency board meeting would precede the evening gala, creating a day of calculated confrontations. James called this morning, Eleanor said, stirring her tea. He wants to meet privately before the board gathering. I raised an eyebrow. Whose side is he really on? His own, as always. Eleanor's voice held no judgment, just pragmatic assessment. But he's particularly interested in those financial discrepancies you mentioned regarding Emily. James, always the numbers man. While Mark had inherited their father's charisma and aggressive business tactics, James had received his analytical mind and patience. The brothers complemented each other professionally while maintaining their childhood rivalry. I'll meet him, I decided. But at my lawyer's office, not anywhere Mark might interrupt. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Smart. Now about the gala. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost declined it until Eleanor glanced at the screen and said, "That's Diane Westridge." I answered immediately. Diane Westridge, CEO of Westridge Communications, our largest potential client. The one whose presentation Mark had given to Emily. Olivia? It's Diane. I'm calling because frankly I'm confused. Her direct tone was refreshing after months of corporate doublespeak. I just received an email that you're taking leave, but then another saying you'll be at tonight's gala. What's really happening with Wilson Enterprises? I took a deep breath. This call could determine not just my professional standing but the company's future. Diane, I appreciate you reaching out directly. There's an internal leadership discussion happening today, but I want to assure you it won't affect our commitment to Westridge Communications. Leadership discussion? She sounded skeptical. Olivia, I've been in business 30 years. I can read between the lines. Is this about Emily Carson? My hand tightened on the phone. What about Emily? She presented to my team last month. Impressive on the surface, but the numbers didn't align with industry standards. My CFO flagged several projections as unrealistic. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. Did you share these concerns with Mark? I tried, Diane replied. He dismissed them as technical details to be ironed out later. That's when I started wondering who was really driving Wilson Enterprises. This changed everything. Not just internal suspicions but external confirmation from our most important prospective client. Diane, would you be willing to share your CFO's analysis with me? And possibly attend our board meeting this afternoon? There was a pause, then, send me the details. I can't promise anything, but I'm invested in knowing exactly who I'm potentially doing business with. After the call ended, Eleanor looked at me expectantly. The universe, I said, works in mysterious ways. By noon, I was sitting in Caroline's office, facing James across the polished conference table. He looked tired, the same furrow between his brows that Mark got when stressed. You've created quite the situation, he began, loosening his tie slightly. I didn't create anything, I replied evenly. Your brother did. James sighed. This doesn't have to be so adversarial, Olivia. There's a simple solution. You take a generous package, retain some shares, everyone saves face. I slid across the folder containing Emily's financial discrepancies, along with Diane Westridge's CFO's analysis. Is that your solution after seeing this? James frowned, opening the folder. As he read, his expression shifted from skeptical to concerned to alarmed. These projections are fantasies, he finally said, looking up. If we presented these to investors, it would be fraud, I finished for him. Which raises the question. Is your brother incompetent for not catching this, or complicit in presenting false information? James removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. You think Emily is manipulating the numbers to make herself look good? I think it's worse than that, I said carefully. Check the transfers on page 16. He flipped to the indicated page, his eyes widening. These customer payments, they're being temporarily diverted before entering our main accounts. For exactly 3 days each time, I confirmed. Just long enough to collect interest in an outside account, then transferred to our corporate holdings. Small amounts each time, but it adds up to nearly $200,000 over 6 months. James was completely pale now. This is embezzlement. Yes, I said simply. And Mark gave her full access to our financial systems when he promoted her. He couldn't have known, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. I kept my expression neutral. That's for the board to decide. The question is, where do you stand, James? He closed the folder, his decision visible in his eyes before he spoke. I stand with the company, he said quietly. Even against my brother if necessary. As he left, Caroline returned with a satisfied smile. Diane Westridge just confirmed. She'll be at the board meeting with her full analysis. I checked the time. Just under 2 hours until the meeting that would determine everything. Let's go over the presentation once more, I said, resting my hand on my active baby bump. We've got a company to save. The boardroom fell silent as I entered, 7 months pregnant in a power suit, flanked by Caroline and Diane Westridge. Mark's expression cycled rapidly through shock, anger, and poorly concealed panic. Emily, seated too close to his right, visibly paled when she recognized Diane. Mrs. Wilson, our board chairman Gerald Thompson began awkwardly. We weren't expecting. Clearly, I interrupted smoothly, taking the empty seat directly across from Mark. But as co-founder and CMO, I believe I'm still entitled to attend discussions about my own company. Especially when my temporary leave was announced without my knowledge or consent. Gerald glanced uncomfortably at Mark, who leaned forward with a practiced, concerned expression. Olivia, everyone understands you're going through a difficult time. Your pregnancy hormones are irrelevant to my business acumen, I finished for him, opening my portfolio. Now shall we discuss why we're really here? The unauthorized promotion of Emily Carson to my position, or the financial discrepancies I've uncovered in her reports? Emily jerked upright. That's absurd. My reports are impeccable. That's one word for them, Diane Westridge said dryly, setting her own folder on the table. Fictional would be another. Mark's attorney, a thin man with perpetually furrowed brows, leaned toward him, whispering urgently. Mark waved him off. Diane, Mark said, attempting charm, this is an internal matter. While we value your business. You should, she interrupted. Especially since my company was about to sign a $30 million contract based on projections that my financial team has determined are, at best, wildly optimistic and at worst, fraudulent. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. James cleared his throat from his position 3 seats down. I've reviewed the documents in question. The discrepancies are significant and systemic. Mark's betrayed expression at his brother's words would have been comical under different circumstances. If I may, Caroline said, distributing folders to each board member, these documents outline the specific issues we've identified, including unusual financial transfers requiring immediate investigation. As the board members flipped through the pages, their expressions grew increasingly grave. Gerald looked up first, directing his question not at me or Mark but at Emily. Ms. Carson, can you explain why client payments were temporarily diverted to an external account before being deposited into corporate holdings? Emily's composure cracked. That was an approved cash flow management strategy too. Approved by whom? I asked quietly. Her eyes flickered to Mark, then away. Telling. Mark stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're all being manipulated by my emotional, hormonal wife who's upset about our personal issues. Mark, I said calmly, the only emotion driving me right now is professional responsibility. If you'd like to discuss personal issues, we can certainly address why you insisted your pregnant wife sleep on the floor last night to accommodate your assistant. A collective intake of breath around the table. Gerald looked mortified. That's not what happened, Mark sputtered, but his protest sounded weak even to my ears. Emily suddenly stood. I need a moment, she mumbled, hurrying from the room with her phone clutched tightly. James followed my gaze. Should someone? Security is monitoring all exits, Caroline assured us. And the IT department has already restricted her access to our systems, per my request this morning. Mark's face flushed deep red. You had no authority. Actually, Gerald interrupted, looking ashen after reading further into the documents. Given these allegations, it was absolutely the right call. He turned to the company's legal counsel. Randall, your assessment? Randall, who had survived 3 decades of corporate transitions by always protecting the company first, cleared his throat. Based on preliminary review, there's sufficient evidence to warrant a full investigation. During such investigations, standard protocol is to suspend all parties potentially involved. Parties? Mark spluttered. You can't possibly mean me. Randall continued impassively. As CEO, you either approved these irregularities, which creates liability, or failed to detect them, which demonstrates negligence. The room erupted in overlapping voices. I remained silent, watching as the carefully constructed facade of Mark's leadership crumbled. James caught my eye across the table and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Gerald finally raised his hands for silence. Given the seriousness of these allegations, I propose an immediate vote. All in favor of temporarily suspending both Mark Wilson and Emily Carson pending investigation, and appointing Olivia Wilson as acting CEO with James Wilson as COO during this period. Hands rose around the table one by one. Even board members I'd expected resistance from seemed swayed by the evidence and Diane Westridge's presence. Only Mark's closest ally, Peter Reed, kept his hand down. Motion carries, Gerald announced. Effective immediately. Mark slammed his hand on the table. This is a coup. My own wife and brother conspiring against me. No, Mark, I corrected quietly. This is accountability. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a security alert. I glanced at the screen and allowed myself a small smile. It appears Ms. Carson is attempting to access the financial server remotely, I informed the room. Fortunately, IT implemented the lockout protocols just in time. Gerald nodded to Randall. Contact law enforcement. We need to move quickly. Mark sank back into his chair, the reality of his situation finally dawning. Olivia, he began, his voice low and pleading, you don't understand what you're doing. Emily and I, it's not what you think. Save it for the investigators, James cut in, standing to signal the meeting's end. This board has made its decision. As everyone gathered their materials, Diane Westridge stopped beside my chair. Impressive work, she murmured. I believe we'll be moving forward with Wilson Enterprises after all. Under your leadership, of course. I nodded gratefully. Thank you for your trust. It's not about trust, she replied with a shrewd smile. It's about recognizing competence. As the boardroom emptied, I remained seated, one hand resting on my active baby. For the first time in months, I felt the company, and my future, was back in the right hands. The hours between the board meeting and the charity gala passed in a whirlwind. Emily had been detained by security while attempting to delete files from the company server remotely. Mark had retreated to his office, refusing to leave despite his suspension. And I had stepped into the role of acting CEO with a calm authority that surprised even me. "We should cancel the gala," James suggested as we regrouped in my newly reclaimed office. "Given today's events." "Absolutely not," I countered, reviewing the latest updates from our security team. "Canceling would only fuel speculation and panic among our clients and partners." Caroline nodded in agreement. "The gala is the perfect opportunity to control the narrative. Every major player in the industry will be there. Better they hear directly from you than through rumors." Eleanor arrived with the burgundy gown we'd selected that morning, now looking more appropriate than ever. "The car will be ready at 7, she announced, surveying the bustling activity in my office with approval. "What about Mark?" James asked the question everyone was avoiding. "He's still technically the host." I met his concerned gaze steadily. "Mark can attend as planned. Anything else would raise too many questions too quickly. But he'll be introduced as co-founder, not CEO." "He won't accept that quietly," James warned. "He doesn't have a choice," Caroline interjected, reviewing her notes. "The board's decision is binding. If he creates a scene, it only hurts his position further." As the others continued discussing logistics, I stepped away to the windows overlooking the city skyline. Just yesterday I had been the one being pushed aside, expected to quietly accept Mark's decisions. Now in less than 24 hours, everything had changed. My phone vibrated with an incoming text. "We need to talk. Please. For the sake of our child." Mark's first mention of our baby as anything other than an inconvenience. I deleted the message without replying. "Olivia." Eleanor's voice pulled me back to the present. "It's time to get ready." The Wilson Foundation Annual Gala was our company's most prestigious event, held in the grand ballroom of the Heritage Hotel. As our car approached the venue, I could see the red carpet, the photographers, the flowing gowns and crisp tuxedos of arriving guests. "Ready?" James asked from beside me, looking uncomfortable in his formal wear but resolute. I adjusted my diamond earrings, a wedding gift from Eleanor that felt particularly appropriate tonight. "Beyond ready." The photographer's flashes intensified as James helped me from the car. I could hear the murmurs spread through the crowd. Olivia Wilson, visibly pregnant, arriving with her brother-in-law rather than her husband. The speculation was already beginning. "Mrs. Wilson." A reporter stepped forward. "Is it true there were major leadership changes at Wilson Enterprises today?" I smiled calmly. "Wilson Enterprises is evolving as all successful companies must. I'd be happy to discuss our exciting new directions inside." More questions followed, but James skillfully guided me past the press line and into the ballroom foyer, where Eleanor waited with Gerald Thompson. "Impressive turnout," Gerald commented, scanning the arriving guests. "The Ching group is here and I just spotted the Miyazaki contingent." "Mark?" I asked quietly. "Already inside," Eleanor replied, keeping to himself by the bar. The event coordinator approached, tablet in hand. "Mrs. Wilson, we have you seated at the head table with Mr. Wilson as planned. Should we make adjustments given?" She trailed off awkwardly. "No changes necessary," I assured her. "We're all professionals here." As we entered the ballroom, conversations momentarily halted. Every eye turned toward our group, assessing, questioning. I straightened my shoulders and moved forward with purpose, greeting key clients and partners with the confidence of someone firmly in control. Mark watched from across the room, tumbler of scotch in hand, his expression unreadable. When our eyes met, he raised his glass in a mock toast before draining it. "He's on his third drink already," James muttered beside me. "This could get messy." "Then we'll handle it," I replied calmly, accepting a sparkling water from a passing server. Diane Westridge appeared at my elbow, resplendent in midnight blue. "The vultures are circling," she observed dryly, nodding toward a group of industry reporters. "What's our story tonight?" "Growth and stability," I replied without hesitation. "Wilson Enterprises is strengthening its internal governance to better serve our clients." She smiled approvingly. "Diplomatic." Not exactly the full truth, but not a lie either. The full truth will come out through proper channels, I said. Tonight is about reassurance. The dinner portion of the evening proceeded with surprising smoothness. Mark remained at our table but engaged minimally, focusing instead on refilling his glass. I delivered brief remarks about the Foundation's achievements, thanked our donors, and introduced the keynote speaker without a single reference to the day's upheaval. It was during the dancing portion of the evening that Mark finally made his move. As I was speaking with a potential investor, I felt a hand on my elbow. "May I have this dance?" Mark asked, his words slightly slurred, his smile not reaching his eyes. The investor tactfully stepped away, leaving us in a small bubble of tense privacy amidst the crowded room. "I don't think that's appropriate," I replied quietly. "My pregnant wife doesn't think dancing with her husband is appropriate," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "But she thinks stealing my company is perfectly fine." I maintained my composure. "This isn't the place, Mark." "When is the place?" he demanded, his grip tightening. "You won't answer my calls. You've turned my family against me. You've manipulated the board with your pregnancy sympathy card." A few heads were turning now. James started moving toward us, but I subtly waved him off. This confrontation was inevitable. Better to control it than avoid it. "Your poor decisions have consequences," I told Mark firmly. "None of this was necessary. All you had to do was treat me with respect." "Respect?" He laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about respect while you parade around in that dress, flaunting your condition, making me look like the villain?" "Your actions made you the villain," I countered, keeping my voice level despite my rising anger. "Not my pregnancy." Mark leaned closer, his words meant only for me. "You think you've won? This is just beginning. I built this company. No one knows it like I do. They'll realize their mistake within a week." I held Mark's gaze steadily. "You built this company? Check the incorporation papers. We built it together. The difference is I can run it without you, but you clearly couldn't run it without me." Before he could respond, a sharp pain lanced through my abdomen. I winced, instinctively placing a hand on my belly. "Very convincing," Mark sneered, mistaking my pain for theatrics. The delicate pregnant woman act again. Another cramp hit, stronger this time. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "I need to sit down," I managed, looking around for James or Eleanor. Mark rolled his eyes. "Of course you do. Always an escape when the conversation gets uncomfortable." I spotted James across the room and tried to signal him, but another wave of pain doubled me over. This time, Mark's expression shifted from contempt to uncertainty. "Olivia." "Something's wrong," I whispered, gripping his arm despite myself. "The baby." Understanding finally dawned in his eyes, replaced immediately by panic. "What do you need? Should I call someone?" "James," I gasped as a warm wetness trickled down my legs. "And an ambulance." Mark's face went ashen as he looked down and saw the small puddle forming on the polished ballroom floor. "Not just fluid, blood." "James," he shouted, all pretense of composure abandoned. "Call an ambulance." The ballroom fell silent, then erupted in confused murmurs as James rushed over. Mark, to my surprise, had already scooped me into his arms and was carrying me toward the exit. His earlier intoxication seemingly evaporated in the crisis. "What happened?" James demanded, following closely. "I don't know," Mark replied, his voice tight with something that sounded almost like fear. "She just started bleeding." Eleanor appeared at my side as Mark carefully laid me on a sofa in the hotel's private lounge. "Ambulance is 3 minutes out," she reported, her normally composed expression strained with worry. The pain intensified, waves of cramping that left me breathless. "It's too early," I whispered. "She's not ready." Mark knelt beside me, his face a complex map of emotions I couldn't fully decode. "Hold on, Olivia. Just hold on." The paramedics arrived with efficient urgency, asking rapid questions about my pregnancy, the pain, any previous complications. "BP is dropping," one announced, attaching monitors to my arm. "We need to move now." As they transferred me to a stretcher, I reached out instinctively, grabbing Mark's wrist. Don't let them give me anything that could hurt the baby. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, of the mother I had become while he was busy pushing me aside. I won't, he promised, and for once I believed him. The emergency room was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Preterm labor, placental abruption, emergency C-section. The words swirled around me as doctors made rapid decisions. Mark remained nearby, his earlier hostility replaced by a tense vigilance. Mr. Wilson, you'll need to wait outside, a nurse instructed as they prepared me for surgery. That's my child, he protested, but the medical team was already wheeling me away. Mark, I called back, surprising myself. Call my sister. Please. He nodded, our eyes meeting briefly before the doors closed between us. The operating room was organized chaos. Through the haze of fear and pain, I heard the anesthesiologist's calm instructions, felt the cool spread of numbness, and then moments that stretched like hours as I stared at the blue surgical drape, waiting. And then a cry. Tiny but fierce, indignant at being thrust into the world 7 weeks too soon. It's a girl, someone announced. She's breathing on her own. Relief flooded through me, but the medical team's activity didn't slow. Still some bleeding, I heard a doctor say. Pressure dropping. Push another unit. The room began to fade at the edges, sounds becoming distant. I tried to focus on my daughter's cries, letting them anchor me as consciousness began to slip. Stay with us, Olivia, a firm voice commanded. Your daughter needs you to fight. The next thing I knew, I was waking in recovery, the steady beep of monitors replacing the earlier urgency. Eleanor sat beside me, her elegant gala attire incongruous in the sterile hospital room. The baby? I asked immediately, my voice a rasp. Eleanor's smile was tired but genuine. 4 pounds, 3 ounces. Small but mighty. They have her in the NICU, but the doctor says she's doing remarkably well. I closed my eyes in relief. Thank you for being here. Your sister is on her way, Eleanor added. Should be here by morning. A thought occurred to me through the fog of medication. Mark. Eleanor's expression tightened slightly. He's here. Been pacing between the NICU and this room for hours. I tried to process this information, but fatigue was pulling me under again. Tell him. Tell him what, dear? But sleep claimed me before I could answer. When I woke again, the room was dim, the window showing a pre-dawn sky. A figure sat slumped in the chair by my bed. Not Eleanor this time, but Mark, his tuxedo rumpled, his face haggard with exhaustion. You're still here, I observed quietly. He startled, then leaned forward. Where else would I be? With Emily, I replied without inflection. Mark flinched as if I'd struck him. Emily was arrested trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. Apparently she had an account there. With company funds. I absorbed this information silently. They let me see her, Mark continued, his voice rough with emotion. Our daughter. She's so small, but the nurses said she's strong. Fighting spirit, they said. Despite everything, I felt a smile tug at my lips. Of course she is. Mark reached out hesitantly, then withdrew his hand before touching mine. Olivia, about everything. Not now, I interrupted gently. I can't do this now. He nodded, accepting the boundary. The doctors said there were complications. With you. That you almost. The words he couldn't say hung between us. That I had nearly died bringing our daughter into the world. But I didn't, I said simply. Mark's composure cracked then, tears spilling down his face. I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that. But I need you to know that seeing you like this, thinking I might lose you both. The door opened, cutting him off as a nurse entered with a small bundle in her arms. Someone stable enough for her first visit, she announced warmly. 20 minutes, then back to the NICU. All other thoughts vanished as she placed my daughter in my arms. Tiny, perfect, with a shock of dark hair and a determined set to her mouth even in sleep. Hello, Emma, I whispered, the name I'd chosen months ago but kept to myself. Mark looked startled. Emma? After my grandmother? I nodded, not taking my eyes off our daughter. She was the strongest woman I ever met. Besides your mother. For a moment we existed in a bubble of fragile peace, united by the miracle between us. But as I looked up from Emma's face to Mark's, I knew the hardest decisions still lay ahead. 3 months later, I sat in my home office reviewing quarterly reports while Emma slept peacefully in the bassinet beside my desk. The French doors opened to a garden in full bloom, so different from the sterile corporate environment I'd once thought essential to success. The doorbell rang, followed by my sister Abby's voice calling out, "It's me." With reinforcements. I carefully lifted Emma, who stirred but didn't wake, and made my way to the living room where Abby was arranging lunch containers on the coffee table. "Thai from that place you love," she announced. "And dessert from Eleanor. She sends her love but couldn't escape some foundation crisis." I smiled, settling onto the sofa with Emma still nestled against me. In the chaos of the past few months, Eleanor had proven herself not just an ally but family in every way that mattered. "How's the transition team doing?" Abby asked, serving the food one-handed while checking her phone with the other. Always the efficient executive. "Better than expected," I admitted. "James has been surprisingly effective as interim CEO. The board's considering making it permanent." After Emma's dramatic arrival, I'd made a decision that shocked everyone. I didn't want the CEO position I'd fought so hard to reclaim. Instead, I'd negotiated a new role as chairwoman of the board, allowing me strategic control without the day-to-day operations. "And Mark?" Abby asked cautiously. I sighed, looking down at Emma's sleeping face. "Complicated." The weeks following Emma's birth had been a strange détente. Mark had been a constant presence in the NICU, learning to feed and hold our tiny daughter alongside me. The man who had once dismissed my pregnancy as an inconvenience now took detailed notes during doctor consultations and researched preemie development with obsessive dedication. "The divorce papers are finalized," I told Abby. "We sign next week." He studied my expression. "You seem at peace with that." "I am," I realized, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "What we had is irreparably broken. But we're finding a way forward as co-parents." The investigation into Wilson Enterprises' finances had ultimately cleared Mark of direct involvement in Emily's embezzlement scheme, though his negligence was undeniable. Rather than fight a public legal battle, he'd agreed to step down permanently, accepting a role as a non-executive consultant focusing on the areas where his talents were genuinely valuable. Emily hadn't fared as well. Facing multiple felony charges and no powerful allies left, she'd accepted a plea deal that included full restitution and jail time. "Have you seen the industry newsletter?" Abby asked, sliding her tablet across the table. "They're calling Wilson Enterprises the new model for corporate accountability and leadership transition." I skimmed the article, noting the praise for our transparent handling of the crisis and the company's subsequent stock rise. Ironic that our worst moment became our best publicity. "Not ironic," Abby countered. "You turned a disaster into an opportunity. That's leadership." The doorbell rang again and I knew without checking that it was Mark for his scheduled visit. Since my release from the hospital, we'd established a careful co-parenting routine, predictable, structured, and entirely focused on Emma. Abby squeezed my hand before gathering her things. "Want me to stay?" I shook my head. "We're okay now." She met Mark at the door as she left, their exchange polite but brief. He entered carrying a small gift bag and the ever-present folder of parenting articles and research he insisted on sharing. "How are my girls?" he asked, the possessive phrase both habitual and increasingly inaccurate. "Emma's been perfect," I replied, rising to transfer our daughter to his waiting arms. "Just had lunch with Abby." Mark settled into the armchair, his entire demeanor softening as he held Emma. For all his flaws, and they were numerous, his love for our daughter was unquestionable. "The new house is ready," he said after a moment. "Just 2 blocks away as we discussed. Close enough for easy transitions but far enough for healthy boundaries," I finished. We'd negotiated these terms meticulously, with therapists and lawyers ensuring the arrangement served Emma's needs first. I've been thinking about what you said, Mark continued, his eyes still on Emma. About finding purpose beyond the company. This was new. Since his removal as CEO, Mark had been adrift, his identity so entwined with his corporate title that its loss left him visibly hollow. The Children's Hospital Foundation reached out, he said. They're looking for someone to lead their fundraising division. I raised an eyebrow. Charitable work? That's unexpected. All those weeks in the NICU, he explained quietly. Watching those nurses and doctors fight for Emma. For all those babies. It changes your perspective. For the first time since our separation, I felt something close to hope for Mark's future. Not our future, but his. A man finding his way back to something authentic after losing himself to ambition and ego. You'd be good at it, I acknowledged. You always could charm money out of people. A ghost of his old smile appeared. Is that a compliment or an insult? Both probably. Emma stirred, her tiny face scrunching in preparation for a cry. Mark immediately adjusted her position, patting her back with a practiced touch that would have been unimaginable 6 months ago. I have something for you, he said, nodding toward the gift bag. A peace offering of sorts. Inside was a framed document, the original business plan we'd written together on a coffee-stained napkin in our apartment 8 years ago. Our first dream, captured in my handwriting and his calculations. I found it while packing, he explained. Thought you should have it. To remember that not everything was bad. I traced the faded writing, memories flooding back of that night. The excitement, the partnership, the genuine belief in each other that had been lost along the way. Thank you, I said simply. As I placed the frame on the mantel, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass. Not the ambitious young woman who'd written that plan, nor the diminished wife I'd allowed myself to become, but someone new. Someone stronger. We made a lot of mistakes, Mark said, following my gaze. I made the worst ones. I turned back to him, to our daughter sleeping in his arms. We did one thing perfectly. Outside, spring sunlight illuminated the garden where I now spent my mornings with Emma, planning my next ventures on my own terms. The divorce papers waited in my office drawer, not an ending but a beginning. The floor I'd refused to sleep on had become the foundation I'd rebuilt myself upon. Yes, Mark agreed, looking down at Emma with undisguised love. One perfect thing.